The deafening sound of the emergency siren jolted Thomas Keller awake at precisely 3:17 a.m. His heart raced as he fumbled for his glasses on the nightstand, knocking over a half-empty glass of water in the process. This wasn't a drill. The United Galactic Academy had strict protocols about nighttime alerts. They only happened when something was genuinely wrong. "Attention all personnel," a mechanical voice announced over the intercom. "Unscheduled ship approaching docking bay 7. All security staff report immediately." "This is not a drill," Thomas groaned. As the Academy's human ambassador and cultural liaison, he would be expected at the landing bay if the visitors were non-human. He quickly pulled on his uniform, the deep blue jacket with silver trim that designated his diplomatic status, and grabbed his ID badge from the desk. As an afterthought, he whistled softly. "Max, come," he called, and his large German shepherd padded over from his bed in the corner. The dog's service vest was hanging by the door, and Thomas quickly secured it around the animal's muscular body. "Looks like we might have an early morning, buddy." The corridors of the academy were awash with activity despite the hour. Security personnel in gray uniforms rushed past him, while sleepy-eyed administrators huddled near information terminals. The Academy, Earth's premier institution for interstellar diplomatic training, occupied a massive orbital station that circled the planet. From its observation decks, you could see the blue-green marble of Earth below, peaceful and serene, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in the hallways. Thomas made his way to the docking bay, Max trotting obediently beside him. When he arrived, Security Chief Amara was already there, her face tense as she monitored the incoming ship's approach on a holographic display. "What do we have?" Thomas asked, running a hand through his disheveled brown hair. "Unregistered vessel," Amara replied without looking away from the display. "Zindarian design, but it's not broadcasting any official identifiers. Could be refugees, could be trouble." Thomas nodded. The Zindarians were a peaceful species from the Andromeda galaxy, known for their advanced mathematical abilities and their striking appearance, tall, with iridescent blue skin and 4 arms. They rarely traveled to Earth except for official academic exchanges. "They're requesting emergency docking procedures," Amara continued, "claiming educational asylum, Thomas frowned. The concept existed in interstellar law, a provision allowing beings to seek refuge for the purpose of study when their home worlds denied them access to knowledge, but it was rarely invoked. The ship docked with a metallic groan that echoed through the bay. Security personnel formed a perimeter around the airlock, weapons not drawn but hands hovering near them. Thomas stepped forward with Max at his side, ready to greet whoever emerged. The airlock hissed open, revealing a young Zindarian. Thomas could tell immediately that something was wrong. The alien was trembling, all 4 arms wrapped around itself in what Thomas recognized as a gesture of extreme distress. Its skin, which should have been vibrant blue, was pale and dull. Most concerning was the fact that it was alone. Zindarians almost never traveled solo due to their collectivist culture. "Welcome to Earth's United Galactic Academy," Thomas said in Standard Galactic, the diplomatic language used across known space. "I am Thomas Keller, human ambassador. May I ask your name and purpose?" The young Zindarian's eyes, all 6 of them, darted around nervously before settling on Thomas. Then, with a sudden shriek that made everyone in the bay jump, it pointed one trembling arm at Max. "Monster," it screamed in broken Standard. "Earth monster. Dangerous predator. Help!" The Zindarian scrambled backward, pressing itself against the wall of the airlock. Security personnel tensed, hands moving to their weapons, unsure whether to focus on the alien or the supposed monster. Thomas quickly raised his hands in a universal gesture of peace. No, this isn't a monster. This is Max. He's my therapy dog." The Zindarian's eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of confusion in their species. "Therapy dog," it repeated, the words clearly unfamiliar. "Yes, a domesticated animal companion. He helps me with anxiety and stress." Thomas kept his voice calm and even. He's completely harmless. He's trained to help people, not hurt them. The alien didn't look convinced. Its gaze remained fixed on Max, who, sensing the tension, had sat down and was looking up at Thomas with calm brown eyes. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable," Thomas suggested. "You mentioned educational asylum. I'd like to hear more about that if you're willing to share." The young Zindarian hesitated, then nodded slowly, though it still kept its distance from Max. "Yes. I am Zorn, third cycle student of quantum relativity at the Zindarian Science Academy. I seek Earth knowledge forbidden on my world." Thomas nodded. "Follow me to the diplomatic suite. We can talk there." He glanced at Security Chief Amara, who gave a curt nod, indicating that she and her team would follow at a discreet distance. As they walked through the corridors, Thomas noticed that Zorn maintained at least 10 feet between itself and Max at all times, flinching whenever the dog turned its head. Other Academy residents, awakened by the commotion, peered curiously from doorways as the unusual procession passed. The diplomatic suite was designed to accommodate various alien physiologies, with adjustable gravity settings, temperature controls, and seating options ranging from traditional chairs to hovering cushions for species that preferred not to make contact with surfaces. Thomas directed Zorn to a 4-armed resting station specifically designed for Zindarian comfort. "Would you like something to drink?" Thomas asked. "We have synthesized Zindarian nectar if that would make you more comfortable." Zorn's eyes darted nervously to Max, who had settled by Thomas's feet. "The dog, it stays with you always." "Max is my service animal," Thomas explained patiently. "He helps me manage a medical condition, but I can't have him wait outside if his presence disturbs you." After a moment's consideration, Zorn shook its head. "No, I must acclimate." "Earth knowledge includes understanding Earth creatures." "Yes," Thomas nodded, impressed by the young alien's reasoning despite its obvious fear. "That's very true. Learning about other species is an important part of interstellar education." Zorn settled cautiously onto the resting station, its 4 arms arranged in the formal posture of academic discussion. "On my world, images of Earth creatures like this dog are forbidden. Our leaders say they are too dangerous, too unpredictable. They say humans are primitive for keeping such beasts close." Thomas listened carefully. This wasn't the first time he'd encountered alien misconceptions about Earth's relationship with animals, but the level of fear Zorn displayed was unusual. "May I ask why you specifically sought asylum here?" "Educational restrictions are serious, but asylum is typically granted for more severe circumstances." Zorn's skin rippled, a Zindarian expression of deep emotion. "I was to be mind-wiped. I accessed forbidden Earth data archives, saw images of Earth life, became curious." Its upper arms gestured in what Thomas recognized as the Zindarian equivalent of a shrug. "Curiosity is discouraged in third cycle students. We are to accept, not question, and that's why you fled." "Yes. When they discovered my research, my educational supervisors reported me. The Thought Correction Bureau scheduled my mind wipe for tomorrow." Zorn's voice trembled. "I could not lose my memories, my questions, so I took a research vessel and followed coordinates to Earth's Academy." Thomas felt a surge of sympathy for the young alien. The concept of forced mind wiping for academic curiosity was abhorrent to human sensibilities. "You made a brave decision, Zorn. Educational asylum was created precisely for situations like yours." Max chose that moment to yawn widely, displaying his teeth. Zorn immediately recoiled, all 6 eyes widening in alarm. "Sharp teeth, predator teeth," it gasped. "Yes, dogs do have teeth designed for meat eating," Thomas acknowledged calmly, "but Max would never use them aggressively. He's trained to be gentle." He reached down to stroke Max's head, demonstrating the peaceful interaction. "Would you like to know more about dogs? It might help reduce your fear." Zorn hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Knowledge dispels fear. This is universal truth." Thomas smiled. "Exactly. Dogs evolved alongside humans for thousands of years. They were originally wild animals called wolves, but over time, they formed a mutually beneficial relationship with humans. We provided food and shelter, and they provided protection and companionship. Symbiotic relationship, Zorn noted, the scientific framework clearly providing some comfort. But how do you control their predatory instincts? Through training and selective breeding over many generations, Thomas explained. Modern dogs, especially service dogs like Max, are specifically bred and trained to be gentle and responsive to human needs. Zorn seemed to consider this, its breathing slowing slightly. On my world, all predatory creatures are kept in containment facilities. The idea of living alongside them is unthinkable. Different evolutionary paths lead to different cultural norms, Thomas said. Humans evolved as omnivores on a planet with many predatory species. We learned to coexist with some and domesticate others. A notification chimed on Thomas's communicator. "Excuse me," he said, checking the message. "The Academy Council has convened an emergency session to review your asylum request. They'd like to meet with you in 1 hour." Zorn's skin paled again. "Will they send me back?" Educational asylum claims have a high success rate, especially in cases involving threatened mind wiping, Thomas assured the alien. "And as Earth's representative, I'll be advocating for you." "Thank you," Zorn said, its voice soft. Then, with visible effort, it asked, "May I?" "Learn more about the dog while we wait," Thomas smiled. "Of course, would you like to try giving him a command? It might help you see how well trained and controlled he is." Zorn's 6 eyes blinked rapidly again. "Command, I may command the Earth creature?" "With my permission, yes." Max knows several basic commands. The simplest is sit, which he's already doing, or down, which would make him lie on the floor. After a moment's hesitation, Zorn leaned forward slightly and said in a quavering voice, "Down." Max looked to Thomas, who nodded, and then the dog smoothly lowered himself to the floor, resting his head on his paws. Zorn gasped softly. It obeyed. The alien's tone contained equal parts surprise and scientific fascination, without force or threat. "Dogs want to please their humans," Thomas explained. "It's part of their nature after thousands of years of co-evolution. Would you like to try another command? You could ask him to shake." "Shake," Zorn repeated, confused. "It means he'll offer his paw to you. It's a greeting gesture." "You'd say shake and he'll lift his paw." Zorn seemed less certain about this. "The creature would touch me?" "Only if you want to complete the greeting by taking his paw briefly," Thomas clarified. "You could just observe without touching." After visible internal debate, Zorn said, "I will observe first. Shake, dog." Max lifted his right paw and held it in the air, looking expectantly at Zorn. The Zindarian leaned forward, studying the gesture with scientific interest. "Fascinating. No visible communication between you and the animal, yet it performs specific actions on verbal cue." "That's right. Dogs can learn hundreds of different commands. Service dogs like Max have especially extensive training." The next hour passed with Thomas explaining canine behavior and training, while Zorn gradually showed less fear and more academic curiosity. By the time they were summoned to the council chamber, the young alien had even ventured to within a few feet of Max, though actual contact remained a step too far. The council chamber was an impressive circular room with a domed ceiling displaying a real-time view of Earth below. 9 council members, 3 humans and 6 representatives from different alien species sat at a curved table facing Zorn. Thomas stood beside the young Zindarian, with Max at his heel, council president Dr. Helena Morrison, a distinguished human diplomat with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, spoke first. "Zorn of Zindaria, we have reviewed your request for educational asylum. Under Galactic Treaty provisions, specifically Article 17 regarding the protection of intellectual freedom, we find your case compelling." Zorn's skin brightened slightly, a sign of hope in Zindarians. "However," Dr. Morrison continued, "we must address a diplomatic concern. The Zindarian government has already filed a formal request for your return, claiming you stole proprietary technology when you took the research vessel." Thomas felt Zorn trembling beside him. "If I may, Council President," he interjected. Zorn fled to prevent a mind wipe procedure, which under Earth's ratification of the Sentient Rights Accord is considered a form of cognitive violence. This would trigger the protection clauses that supersede property concerns. Dr. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. A valid point, Ambassador Keller. However, the Zindarian government claims no such procedure was scheduled. Zorn's 4 hands clenched into fists. They lie, I saw the documentation. My supervisor, Academic Director Vrez, signed the order himself. The Arcturian Council member, a tall, thin being with crystalline skin, leaned forward. You have evidence of this order, young one, Zorn's shoulders slumped. No, such documents are kept in secure systems. I had only momentary access when I discovered my fate. Thomas felt a sudden inspiration. Council President, if I may suggest, the research vessel's navigational log would show that Zorn plotted a direct course to Earth immediately after accessing the administrative systems. This timing would support Zorn's claim about discovering the mind wipe order. Dr. Morrison nodded to a technician who quickly began accessing the ship's systems. After a tense moment, the technician confirmed, "The logs show exactly that sequence, Madam President." Access to administrative systems at 22:14 Zindarian Standard Time, followed by immediate navigational plotting to Earth coordinates at 22:17. That hardly proves the existence of a mind wipe order, argued the Rigelian Council member, his tentacles waving dismissively. Perhaps not conclusively, Thomas acknowledged, but combined with the fact that Zorn risked everything to flee, it creates a reasonable presumption that should trigger asylum protections pending a full investigation. The council members exchanged glances, communicating in the subtle body language of experienced diplomats. Finally, Dr. Morrison spoke again. We will grant preliminary educational asylum for a period of 30 Earth days, during which time a formal investigation will be conducted. Zorn will be assigned quarters in the student section and may begin limited studies under supervision. She fixed Zorn with a serious gaze. However, you must remain within Academy boundaries, and any communication with Zindaria must be approved by Ambassador Keller. Zorn's skin rippled with relief. Thank you, Council. I accept these terms with gratitude. As they left the council chamber, Zorn turned to Thomas. I owe you my mind, Ambassador. Without your support, they might have returned me to Zindaria. It's my job to ensure fair treatment for all beings seeking knowledge, Thomas replied modestly. And please call me Thomas. Zorn nodded, then glanced down at Max. And I owe you an apology, Thomas. I judged your companion harshly based on misinformation. That's perfectly understandable. Fear of predators is a natural instinct for many species. The important thing is that you're willing to learn. Yes, learning is why I came. Zorn hesitated, then asked, would it be permitted for me to learn more about Earth animals as part of my studies? The forbidden knowledge that first sparked my curiosity, Thomas smiled. I think that could definitely be arranged. In fact, I know a xenobiology professor who would be thrilled to have a Zindarian perspective in her class. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as Zorn settled into academy life. The young alien was assigned a spacious dormitory designed for Zindarian physiology, with special lighting to mimic the spectrum of their home world. Thomas helped Zorn register for classes, focusing on the areas of Earth knowledge that had been forbidden: natural biology, evolutionary theory, and interspecies ethics. Professor Frances Harrington, the Academy's leading xenobiologist, was particularly delighted to welcome Zorn to her comparative biology class. A tall woman with auburn hair, always pulled back in a practical ponytail, she had a reputation for challenging students to question their most basic assumptions about life. Today, we have a unique opportunity, she announced to her class of 20 students from 12 different species. Zorn will share the Zindarian perspective on predator-prey relationships, which differs significantly from Earth models. Zorn, still somewhat nervous in the large group, stood on the speaking platform. On Zindaria, all life evolved from photosynthetic ancestors. We have no true predators in our evolutionary history. All Zindarians and most Zindarian animals derive nutrients directly from our twin suns or from plant matter. A Denebian student raised a tentacle. But how did complex life forms evolve without the selective pressures of predation? Competition for light created different evolutionary pressures, Zorn explained, growing more confident as it spoke on a scientific topic. Species developed height, specialized light-capturing organs, and eventually mobility to seek optimal light conditions. Fascinating, Professor Harrington commented. This explains the profound cultural difference in how Zindarians view Earth's predatory species. Without predation in your evolutionary history, the very concept must seem unnatural. Zorn nodded. Yes. When I first saw images of Earth predators, wolves, lions, sharks, I experienced what humans might call existential terror. The idea of creatures evolved specifically to consume others is difficult to comprehend. Thomas, sitting at the back of the classroom with Max, noticed how Zorn's gaze kept returning to the dog. There was still fear there, but now mixed with intellectual curiosity. After class, Professor Harrington approached Thomas. "Your Zindarian friend has remarkable potential," she said. But that fear response to Earth predators could limit his educational experience. "Have you considered desensitization therapy?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "For Zorn, I'm not sure if that's culturally appropriate. Zindarians have strict protocols about psychological interventions." "Not formal therapy," Harrington clarified. "I meant controlled exposure. Start with images, then videos, perhaps working up to supervised interaction with the gentlest Earth animals. Your Max would be perfect for the final stage." "I'll suggest it to Zorn," Thomas promised. "But it has to be their choice." When Thomas broached the subject later that day, Zorn surprised him by immediately agreeing. "Yes, this is exactly the kind of experiential learning that is forbidden on Zindaria. To understand Earth biology truly, I must overcome my instinctive responses." And so began what Zorn dubbed Operation Predator Acclimation. Each evening, Thomas and Professor Harrington worked with the young alien, starting with still images of Earth predators, explaining their ecological roles and evolutionary history. They progressed to videos, then to visiting the Academy's small biological garden where some harmless Earth insects and small reptiles were kept for study. Max became an integral part of the process. Zorn would set goals for proximity, first being able to stay in the same room without trembling, then reducing the distance gradually. Thomas taught Zorn about canine body language, helping the alien understand the difference between aggressive postures and friendly ones. 2 weeks into the program, they experienced a breakthrough. Thomas was demonstrating Max's training by having the dog perform various tasks, fetching objects, navigating simple obstacles, and responding to hand signals. Zorn watched with growing fascination. "The neural complexity required for such tasks is remarkable," the alien observed. "On Zindaria, we were taught that Earth animals operate purely on instinct without higher cognition." "That's definitely not true," Thomas replied. "Many Earth animals, especially mammals like dogs, have sophisticated problem-solving abilities and emotional intelligence." As if to prove the point, Max, sensing Zorn's reduced fear, approached the alien slowly and sat about 3 feet away, looking up with calm eyes. "He's offering friendship," Thomas explained softly. "He can sense that you're less afraid now." Zorn stared at the dog, all 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. Then, with visible effort, the alien extended one trembling hand. "May I touch him?" "Of course," Thomas encouraged. "Just let him sniff your hand first. It's how dogs gather information." Zorn cautiously held out a blue hand. Max leaned forward, sniffed curiously, then gently pressed his nose against the alien's palm. Zorn let out a small gasp. "It's warm and soft." Wonder replaced fear in the alien's voice. "Not at all like the cold, deadly predators we were taught about." Max, sensing acceptance, wagged his tail. Zorn's eyes widened further. "The tail movement that indicates positive emotion," Thomas nodded. "Happiness, yes, he's pleased that you're not afraid anymore." Emboldened, Zorn gently stroked Max's head. The dog leaned into the touch, causing the alien to let out a sound that Thomas recognized as Zindarian laughter, a musical chiming that filled the room. "This is extraordinary," Zorn exclaimed. "To think that my world forbids knowledge of such remarkable creatures. It is a greater loss than I realized." The moment was interrupted by an urgent chime from Thomas's communicator. He checked the message and his expression immediately sobered. "What is it?" Zorn asked, withdrawing its hand from Max. "The Council has called an emergency session. A Zindarian diplomatic vessel has arrived demanding your immediate return." Thomas's voice was grave. "They're claiming you're carrying classified biological data in your neural pathways and represent a security threat." Zorn's skin paled dramatically. "They've escalated to a security claim that bypasses educational asylum protections under Section 47 of the Galactic Treaty." Thomas nodded grimly. "They're clever, but we won't give up without a fight. The council session starts in 30 minutes. We should prepare." The council chamber was tense when they arrived. Seated at one end of the table was a senior Zindarian official whose elaborate head covering indicated high government rank. 4 Zindarian security officers stood behind him, their posture rigid. Dr. Morrison opened the session with formal introductions. "Council members, this is High Administrator Plex of the Zindarian Ministry of Knowledge Security. He has requested this emergency session regarding our asylum student, Zorn." High Administrator Plex stood, his 4 arms arranged in the formal pattern denoting authority. "Esteemed Council, I regret that this minor academic matter has escalated to diplomatic channels. Student Zorn accessed classified biological defense algorithms before fleeing. These neural data patterns pose a security risk to Zindaria if shared with other worlds." Thomas felt Zorn tense beside him. This was a serious accusation that could override asylum protections. He stepped forward. "High Administrator, this claim contradicts your government's initial statement that Zorn simply stole a research vessel. May I ask what evidence supports this new allegation?" Plex's eyes narrowed slightly. "The evidence is classified, Ambassador Keller. But I am authorized to state that a full neural scan of student Zorn's memory patterns will reveal the breach." A neural scan. Thomas couldn't hide his shock. "Such procedures are highly invasive and potentially harmful. The Academy would never consent to." "The treaty is clear," Plex interrupted. "When legitimate security concerns are raised, verification procedures take precedence over individual protections." Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "High Administrator, while the treaty does allow for verification, it must be conducted in a manner consistent with the medical ethics of all parties. A full neural scan without consent violates at least 3 provisions of Earth's Sentient Rights Accord." Thomas saw an opening. "If I may suggest a compromise, a limited scan focused only on the specific memory signatures that would indicate exposure to the classified materials. This would protect both Zindarian security interests and Zorn's neural integrity." Plex considered this, his upper arms making subtle gestures that Thomas recognized as calculations. "Acceptable, provided the scan is conducted by Zindarian technicians using our equipment." "Unacceptable," Thomas countered immediately. "A neutral third party must conduct any scan, with observers from both Earth and Zindaria present." The negotiation continued for almost an hour, with various council members weighing in on procedural details. Finally, an agreement was reached. The scan would be limited, conducted by Academy medical staff with a Zindarian observer, and the results would be reviewed jointly by both parties. As they left the council chamber to prepare for the scan scheduled for the following morning, Zorn was visibly shaken. "Thomas, there is something I must tell you. I did access biological data before I fled, but it wasn't classified defense algorithms. It was educational material about Earth animals, specifically about domesticated predators like your dog." Thomas frowned. "Why would Zindaria classify information about Earth pets as a defense matter?" "I don't know," Zorn admitted, "but the neural scan will show that I accessed those files." "Will that be enough for them to demand my return?" Not if we can prove the material isn't actually a security risk, Thomas said thoughtfully. We need to find out exactly what you accessed and why the Zindarian government is so determined to keep it secret. They spent the evening in the Academy's information center, with Thomas using his diplomatic clearance to access Earth's historical records of information sharing with Zindaria. What they discovered was surprising. "Look at this," Thomas said, pointing to a diplomatic record from 50 years earlier. Earth offered Zindaria full access to our biological databases as part of a knowledge exchange. The Zindarian Council of Knowledge initially accepted, but then specifically excluded all data about predatory species, especially domesticated ones. Zorn leaned closer to the screen. "That makes no sense. Why would they specifically exclude that information?" "There's a notation here from the Earth diplomat at the time," Thomas continued. He speculated that the Zindarian leadership feared the concept of domesticated predators might inspire political dissent. Political dissent. How? Thomas's eyes widened as he made the connection. Think about it from their perspective. The concept that creatures evolved for hunting and killing could be trained to protect and serve cooperatively, it challenges their entire worldview about the nature of predatory behavior. Zorn's skin rippled with sudden understanding. And by extension, challenges their belief that certain types of knowledge are inherently dangerous and must be controlled. The alien sat back, all 6 eyes wide. "My government isn't afraid of biological data leaking to enemies. They're afraid of the philosophical implications of humans living harmoniously with former predators." "Exactly," Thomas said. "It undermines their justification for strict thought control. If predators can be trained to help rather than harm, maybe dangerous knowledge can be managed safely too." The next morning, they arrived at the medical bay where the neural scan would take place. High Administrator Plex was already there, along with a Zindarian technician and several council members serving as observers. Dr. Eliza Chen, the Academy's chief medical officer, explained the procedure. "The scan will isolate memory patterns related specifically to biological data access during the period in question. It will not access any other memories or thoughts." Zorn lay on the scanning platform, visibly nervous but determined. Thomas stood nearby with Max at his side, offering moral support. The scan took approximately 20 minutes, during which Zorn remained perfectly still, eyes closed in concentration. When it was complete, Dr. Chen transferred the results to a secure display visible to all parties. The scan confirms that student Zorn accessed biological files related to Earth canines, specifically information about domestication, training, and the evolutionary history of human-canine partnerships. High Administrator Plex stepped forward. "These are precisely the classified materials we were concerned about. Under Section 47, we demand Zorn's immediate return to Zindaria for memory purification." Thomas had been prepared for this. "I challenge the classification of this material as a security risk," he stated formally. "Under treaty provisions, information cannot be retroactively classified to facilitate retrieval of an asylum seeker. These materials have been classified for over 50 Earth years," Plex countered smoothly. "Yes, but not as security risks," Thomas argued. "They were classified as restricted educational material. There's a critical legal distinction." Dr. Morrison, who had been quietly observing, now spoke up. "High Administrator, Ambassador Keller raises a valid point. For Section 47 to apply, the information must pose an actual security threat to Zindaria. How exactly does knowledge about Earth's domesticated animals threaten your world's security?" Plex hesitated, clearly unprepared for this direct challenge. "The philosophical implications could destabilize certain educational frameworks. Philosophical implications are explicitly protected under the educational asylum provisions," Thomas pointed out. "In fact, they're the very reason those provisions exist." The debate continued for several hours, becoming increasingly technical as both sides cited various treaty clauses and precedents. Throughout it all, Zorn remained calm, occasionally offering clarifications about Zindarian law that strengthened their position. Finally, Dr. Morrison called for a council vote. The result was 7-2 in favor of maintaining Zorn's asylum status, with a formal finding that the accessed information did not constitute a legitimate security risk. High Administrator Plex was visibly displeased. The Zindarian government will register a formal protest with the Galactic Assembly, he declared. This matter is not concluded. Your protest will be noted, Dr. Morrison replied diplomatically. However, our decision stands. Student Zorn will remain under Academy protection to pursue educational opportunities unavailable on Zindaria. As Plex and his delegation departed, Zorn turned to Thomas, skin glowing with the Zindarian equivalent of elated relief. I never imagined when I fled that I would find not just knowledge but understanding. Thank you for defending my right to learn. You're welcome, Thomas replied, but I think someone else deserves your thanks too. He nodded toward Max, who had remained quietly at his side throughout the proceedings. Zorn knelt down, now without any trace of fear, and gently stroked Max's head. Yes, thank you, Earth Therapy Dog, for teaching me that what we fear most sometimes turns out to be what we needed all along. In the weeks that followed, Zorn became a dedicated student of Earth biology, particularly focusing on the evolution of cooperative relationships between different species. The young alien's unique Zindarian perspective brought fresh insights to classes, and several professors noted that having Zorn challenge Earth-centric assumptions improved the educational experience for everyone. Most remarkably, Zorn developed a special bond with Max. With Thomas's permission, the alien would often take the dog for walks around the Academy grounds, proudly explaining to curious onlookers that this was an Earth Therapy dog, not a monster, but a helper. 3 months after arriving at the Academy, Zorn was officially granted permanent educational residence. In a small ceremony attended by Thomas, Professor Harrington, and several new friends, Zorn was presented with an Academy identification badge and full student privileges. I have news, Zorn announced after the ceremony. 2 more Zindarian students have applied for educational asylum after learning about my experience. They too wish to study forbidden knowledge. That's wonderful, Thomas said. The Academy will welcome them. There's more, Zorn continued, skin rippling with excitement. My case has sparked debate on Zindaria. Some educational councils are questioning the practice of knowledge restriction. It's a small beginning, but perhaps one day my people will understand that knowledge itself is never the monster only fear of it is. As if understanding the significance of the moment, Max pressed his head against Zorn's hand. The alien, once terrified of the Earth monster, now laughed and scratched behind the dog's ears with the easy familiarity of true friendship. When I first arrived, I thought I was seeking asylum just for myself, Zorn reflected. Now I realize I'm part of something much larger, a bridge between worlds with different evolutionary paths but shared potential for understanding. Thomas smiled. That's what the Academy was created for, and sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected teachers. He glanced down at Max, who wagged his tail contentedly, unaware of his role in interstellar diplomacy. Later that evening, as Thomas prepared for bed, he found Zorn and Max in the Academy's observation lounge, both gazing out at the blue-green sphere of Earth below. The sight of the alien and the dog sitting companionably side by side, 2 beings from entirely different evolutionary pathways finding connection, filled him with profound hope for the future of interspecies relations. Some barriers, it seemed, could be overcome simply by the willingness to learn. And sometimes, the most effective diplomat in the galaxy was a therapy dog named Max, who had taught at least one alien that Earth's monsters were nothing to fear after all.